Good day, everyone. We will be doing another packet tracer activity entitled Connect a Router to a LAN. This is CCNAv7 ITN Packet Tracer Activity 10.3.4. Let us open our packet tracer file.
Don't forget to log in with your user profile. Okay. Let me again put in this instruction onto the side of the screen so you'll be able to see and read from it during the performance of an activity.
Looking at the topology given for this activity, we have the following devices, two routers R1 and R2, in which are connected in a WAN or a wide area network. Each of the routers are connected to two switches, R1 to S1 and S2, R2 to S3 and S4. This switch connects to our local area network where PC1 belongs. S2 also connects to another local area network, and same goes for S3 and S4. Notice that the indicators in the connections of the routers to the switches are in red symbol. This means that the configurations have not been completed, thereby connectivity to the local area networks from the routers is not enabled yet. That's why we will be doing this packet tracer activity. We will be connecting the routers to the local area networks. Okay. Looking at our manual, we are given again the addressing table of all the devices on our topology. We have the routers with their interfaces, the respective IP addresses and subnet mask, and all the PCs with their IP address, subnet mask, and their default gateways. Notice that the switches were not given any configurations of its IP addresses. It's because switches actually doesn't need to have an IP address to be able to perform its operation as a switch and connect host in a local area network. Unless you want to access it remotely or you want to directly ping it or verify its connectivity, then an IP address must be configured. Moving on to the objectives. This activity has three parts and we are to first display router information, configure the router interfaces, and lastly, verify the configurations. In this activity, we'll be using various show commands to display the current state of the router. We will also be using the addressing table given above to configure all the interfaces. And finally, we will be using commands to verify and test our configurations. Let's proceed to part 1, and that is on displaying router information. What we will do is to click on each of the routers, select the command line interface or the CLI tab, and use the Cisco password to access the user exec mode, and to access or go to the privilege exec mode, we'll be using the password class, right? R1 for R1. Okay. From R1, we select the CLI tab, press enter, and you'll be asked with the password. So the password here is Cisco. We go to the privilege exec mode, and the password is class, right? All right. Question letter A. Which command displays the statistics for all interfaces configured on a router? The command is show interfaces. So if we press the enter button, this would show us all the detailed information about the interfaces. So I'll just press the space bar to get through all the information. And if we scroll it down, you'll see that we have groups of detailed information about the first interface, which is Gigabit Ethernet 0/0. So these are all the information. For the next interface, so we can see this information and so on, right? For all the interfaces, right? So this would be the last interface. So that's fast Ethernet 0/1/3. And these are all the details about that interface, right? Okay. So for now, we need not to know all of this detailed information, and we'll be discussing each of these characteristics or properties as we go along with our activities. Okay. Next question, letter B. Which command displays the information about the serial 0/0/0 interface only? Yes. Show interfaces allows us to view all information of all the interfaces. But if we want a specific interface, we type in show interface and then the specific interface only. So that's serial 0/0/0. Right? So serial 00. Now, okay, this is now the display for interface serial 0/0/0. Right? Next question. Enter the command to display the statistics for the serial 0/0 we just did, and let's answer the following questions. What is the IP address configured on R1? Okay, so the IP address is found here. So IP address is 209.165.200.255 with a subnet mask of /30. Number two, what is the bandwidth of the serial interface? Bandwidth can be found here. So that's 1544 kilobit or equivalent to 1.544 megabit. Letter D, enter the command to display the statistics for the GI interface 0/0 and answer the following questions. So we'll be doing the same command this time, the GI interface. So I just use the up arrow key to show the history of the commands and change this to Gigabit Ethernet 0/0. Okay, so let's enter. Okay, and these are all the information about the interface. What is the IP address for R1? All right, so for R1, Gigabit Ethernet doesn't contain any IP address, right? We do not see it here. So the reason why is, let's take a look at our topology for R1. This actually is our serial interface, and we know that it has been configured to connect to the other router. But take note, so let's try to look for the Gigabit Ethernet interfaces. So this is 0/0. This is 0/1. So there is no IP address configured yet. That's why that is what we'll be doing for this activity. So let's go back to our router. And our answer for number one is no IP address yet. Okay. But what is the MAC address of the Gigabit Ethernet 0/0 interface? MAC address, or the Media Access Control address, is the physical address, and it can be found here. So a MAC address is a 12 hexadecimal digit code. So this is actually the physical address of our device. It's unique to each hardware or a device. Okay. Next question. What's the bandwidth of this interface? So bandwidth can be found here, right? So that's 1 million kilobit, or equivalent to 1 gigabit, right? So that's why this interface is enabled to work up to 1 gigabit speed. Okay, so we're done with step 1. Let us display a summary list of the interfaces in R1. So how do we do that? Which command should we use to display a brief summary of the current interfaces, their status, and the IP address assigned to them? So previously we used the show interfaces, right? But this gives us detailed information. So if you want a brief summary, the command we'll be using is show IP interface brief. Okay, again, show IP interface brief, and we press the enter button. Okay, so let me just pull this so that we'll be able to see the table of the interfaces with assigned IP address and its status, which is an up status, right? Only serial 0/0/0 has been configured with an IP address. The rest are unassigned and are down. Okay, cut down sila. Okay. Alright, so for the question, so we just did letter B. We entered the command show IP interface brief, and number 1, how many serial interfaces are there on R1 and R2? So for R1 first, so there are actually 2 serial interfaces. Okay. Next question, how many Ethernet interfaces are there on R1? So we can find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Ethernet interfaces for R1. Question number 3, are all the Ethernet interfaces on R1 the same? Actually, it's not, because we have 2 gigabit Ethernet interfaces and we have 4 fast Ethernet interfaces. So this one is for a maximum of 1 gigabit speed, and usually this one are for 1 megabit bandwidth, right? So we are asked to also get the summary list of the interfaces in the other router. So let's check on router 2. Go to the CLI. So let me also change the size. Okay, let's enter. Our password is Cisco and class. Okay, so let's show IP interface brief. Alright, for R2, to answer that question, how many serial interfaces are there? There are also 2 serial interfaces. Let's go back to the question. How many Ethernet interfaces? So R2 this time only has 2 Ethernet interfaces, right? So that's it for step 2 for both R1 and R2. Okay, let's again go back to R1 for step 3. Okay, so let's go back to R1. Alright, okay. Okay, what command displays the contents of the routing table? So to display the contents of the routing table, we'll actually be using the command show IP route. So we type in show IP route. Okay. This would display the routing table of our R1, and pressing enter, this is actually our routing table. So the routing table only contains the following information. So these are codes or legends, okay, and these are the information under our routing table. So for the question, so let me just pull this down. How many connected routes are there? So this uses the C code. So we only need to look at the line on our routing table which uses the C code. So there is just one, right? So don't forget to answer. There is just one connected route. So which route is listed? The route listed is that of an IP address or network address 209.165.200.244. So if we look at this one, so that's 200.244. So router 1 is directly connected to this network, which is the 1. So that's 219.165.200.244. Okay, let's go to the next question. How does a router handle a packet destined for a network that is not listed in the routing table? So, right, when a router has its routing table, which means it knows its nearby networks, it will be able to deliver or route all the packets of information. So, what if this router receives a packet which is going to a network which is not on its routing table? So in that case, the router will just drop the packet. So that packet would just be lost, right? Okay, so we have seen the routing table of R1. So let's proceed to part 2 now. Let's configure the Gigabit Ethernet 0/0 interface on our first router. So the commands are given. So let's again go back to our router 1, right? And we need to go to the global configuration mode, and we need to type in configure terminal. And in here, we type in interface Gigabit Ethernet 0/0. So this may contain a space or none. Okay, so both would be accepted. Okay, so typing in interface GI 0/0, we're now in our interface configuration mode, and we are to assign now the IP address. So IP address for this interface is 192.168.10.1, followed by the subnet mask, which is 255.255.0. So that's a slash 24 subnet mask. So let's take a look at the addressing table. For R1, this interface would have this address, right? So that's 192.168.10.1. That is actually what we are assigning. Okay, so let's go back to part 2. Right, and then press the enter button. Don't forget to type in the no shutdown. So this would enable our router interface to be activated. Or if we press enter, you'll see that the state of our interface GI 0/0 has been changed to an up state. So change state to up. It's now activated. It's now active. Right? Next, It's also good practice to configure a description for each interface to help document the network. So we'll be assigning an interface description so that we would know where this interface is connected to. So let's take a look again at our topology. R1 actually has gigabit Ethernet interface 0/0 connecting to S1. So we can have that as our description. Now, notice that when we configured our router with the 0/0 interface, the status now is already up and is green in color in our packet tracer file. So let's assign a description still under the interface configuration mode. Let's type in description. So the text that follows would be the description of that interface. So connection to S1. So we type in enter and right. We're done with letter B. So we can use the description LAN connection to S1 or simply connection to S1. Right. Next, R1 should now be able to ping the PC1. Okay, ping is short for packet internet grouper. So this is a command to verify connectivity between devices. So let's try to ping. Okay. So when we ping, the ping command works in the privilege exec mode, not in the global configuration or the interface configuration mode. So we have to exit from here by either typing in exit twice or typing in the end command. Right? So let's try to ping 192.168.10.10. So that's the IP address of PC1. So let's take a look at this. So that's the IP address of PC1. So we'll verify if we'll now be able to connect to that by pressing the enter button. Alright, so sending 100 byte ICMP is messaging protocol to 192.168.10.10. So this identifies our PC and the success rate is 80% or 4 out of 5. So we may need to do that again because uh, the first time we issue a ping, the connection is still being established. So, but an 80% actually is a good mark or telling us that the connectivity is good. So we'll try to issue that again. This time, the success rate is 100%. Right? So be it 80 or 100, that's already a connectivity indication. Right? So next, step 2, configure the remaining GI interfaces on R1 and R2. Oh, so we'll be doing the remaining interface for R1 and the other two interfaces for R2. So we'll be assigning an IP address, activate them by typing in the no shot command, configure with a description, and then we'll be verifying their interface configurations, right? So let's continue with R1 for the other interface. So again, we'll be going to the global configuration mode and type in this time interface. You can use the shortcut GI0/. So we're done with 0/0. This time we'll have 0/1. Yes, we can have a shortcut for gigabit Ethernet as GI and then followed by the interface number. So press enter and this time we'll be assigning an IP address So what's the IP address for the second interface? So that's 192.168.11.1. And of course, don't forget the subnet mask 255.255.255.0, right? And then press enter. Don't forget the no shutdown or simply no shot to make the interface on an up state. And of course, the description. This interface connects to S2, right? So connects to S2. Okay, this interface, okay, this interface connects to S2. Okay, so we now have an amber light color here earlier. So that means it's already establishing a connection, and right now it's already a green. So we have we had properly configured R1 to connect to the switches and eventually to the local area networks. We'll do the same for R2. Okay, so let's go to R2 again. So we had been logged out. So let me again open the manual. Okay, this is R2. All right, we are we are here, step 2. Okay, so for R2, so let me just log in. Okay, password is class. Okay, and then global configuration mode, right? In the global configuration mode, again, for R2, we'll be using the same interfaces, GI00, G01, right? So, sorry. Okay, so sige, let's just look at this addressing table. So we'll go to the interface 0/0 first, okay, and then we assign an IP address. So that's 10.1.1.1 with a subnet mask. Is it the same? Yes. Subnet mask is 255.255.0, no shot, and then description. Description for this interface is connection to S3. S3 is the top switch, right? So S3. So we have our S3, enter. Okay, we're done. So let's use our command history to look for the command interface GI, this time changing it to 01. Okay, and then press enter. We're now on the 0/1 interface. We assign an IP address. So I'm just pressing the arrow up key. For GI 0/1 is 10.1.2.1. So we'll change this to, sorry. So we'll just change this to 2. Okay, we'll change this to 2. 2. Okay. 10.1.2.1 with 255.0. So again, the IP address for the second interface is 10.1.2.1 with the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. Press enter. Don't no shot. Don't forget the no shot. Okay. And then the description. Description, connection to S4. Right? Okay. We're done with that step. Okay. Here. We're done with step 2. Okay. We were able to configure IP addresses, activate, and include their descriptions. How about letter B, verify interface configurations? So how do we verify the interface configurations? So we can, actually we'll be doing that on part 3. Yeah, we'll just do that on part 3. What we'll do is to back up the configurations to our NVRAM. So to back up, okay, we need to copy this running configuration to the startup configuration. We did that on our previous activity, right? So we have to get out of the interface configuration mode, okay, and copy running to the startup config. So copy running dash config to startup dash config. So this is our source and this is our destination. So we press enter. This would ask us if the destination file name is the startup dash config. We just press enter to say yes, and it's all done, right? So let's do the same for R1, right? So, and okay, copy shortcut, we can have it as copy space run space start. Okay, press enter. Is it is this the destination file? Yes. So we're done with step 3. Save the configuration files to NVRAM. So we use the command copy. Oh, so we are now at part 3. Notice that the completion is already 100, but we still need to perform part 3 to be able to answer the following questions, right? Okay. Step 1, use verification commands to check your interface configuration. So we'll be using the show IP interface brief. Alright, so this would also verify the interfaces which we had assigned. I mean, this would verify the configurations which we did for our interfaces. Right? So let's type in show IP interface brief. Okay, so this time, previously we only have one interface with an IP address and an up status, but right now both the gigabit Ethernet interfaces are now assigned with their IP addresses and the status are already up. Okay, that's for R1. So what would be the question? How many interfaces on R1 are configured with IP addresses and in the up and up state? So for R1, there are already 3. What part of the interface configuration is not displayed in the command output? So what part has not been displayed? So when we did the configuration, these are the commands we did, right? So we assigned the IP address, so we can see it here. Subnet mask is not here actually. The description can also be found here. Alright, so subnet mask is not displayed when we show IP interface brief. So what commands can we use to verify this part of the configuration? So for us to be able to see the description and the subnet mask, okay, so one command we can use is the show run, right? For us to be able to see the subnet mask and the description. So let's press enter. Okay. Show run would give us the description and the subnet mask for both the gigabit Ethernet interfaces. Alright. So press the space bar. Okay, so let's do the same for R2 so that we'll be able to answer this question. So let's go back to R2 and type in the show IP interface brief. Sorry. Right? Okay, so for the show IP interface brief, we already have 3 interfaces which are in the up state, right? So for both routers 1 and 2, there are 3 interfaces in the up state. Okay, so same for the next 2 questions. Next, letter B. Use show IP route on both R1 and R2 to view the current routing tables and answer the following questions. Okay. Okay, so let's begin with R1 first. Okay, so show IP route. Okay, for R1, okay, so this is the routing table. So we now have additional information, right? Question, how many connected routes, the one which uses the C code, do you see on each router? So for R1, we have 1, 2, 3 directly connected interfaces. So for R1, there are 3 C. Number 2 question, how many OSPF routes uses the O code do you see on each router? So we have 1 and 2. Okay. Let's do 1 and 2 question for R2 first. So let's go to R2 and show IP route. Press enter. So how many C's are there? 1, 2, and 3. How many O's? 1 and 2. So the same, right? So for both routers, there are 3 C's and 2 O's. Next question. If the router knows all the routes in the network, then the number of connected routes, which are the C's, and the dynamically learned routes, which are the O's, should equal the total number of LANs and WANs. So how many LANs and WANs are in the topology? So let's take a look at the topology. Okay. So how many LANs and WANs are there? So we have LAN number 1, LAN 2, LAN 3, LAN 4, and 1, 1. 1, 1. Said it again. So that's 1, 1. Right? So for a total of 5. So we have 5. Okay, let's go back to the question. Okay, so we have 5. Okay, number 4, does this number match the number of C and O routes shown in the routing table? Yes, we had 3 C's and 2 O's. So for both routers, this does match the number of C and O routes, which means we are not missing any required configuration, right? So we're done with step 1 of part 3 and we're almost at the end with step 2, test end-to-end connectivity across the network. So we must be able to ping any PC to any other PC on the network, and we should be able to ping the active interfaces on the routers. For example, let's try in the following. From the command line on PC1, let's ping PC4. So this is our PC1. So let me go back to this mode. So PC1 will click on the CLI or the command prompt under the desktop tab. So click command. So this is equivalent to your DOS prompt or command prompt of your PC. So we ping PC4. So what's the IP address of PC4 again? So let's take a look at the addressing table. PC4 is 10.1.2.0. So 10.1.2.0, 10, sorry, 10.1.2.10. So 10.1.2.10 and press enter. Okay. So the first time it had a request timeout since it's just establishing its connection. Let's do that again. Okay, so this time we have a full connectivity for from PC1 to PC4. So this reply indicates that we have connectivity between the two devices. So it's not in the instruction, but let us try to ping PC3 from PC1. So that's 1.10. So can we ping or are we connected to PC3? Is PC1 connected to PC3? Yes. So let's do that again. All right. So how about PC1 connecting to PC2. So PC2's IP address is 192.168.1.1. PC1.11.10. Take note that PC1 and PC2 are on the same broadcast domain, so they share the same router, right? So if you press the enter button, did we get the address right? Oh no, the address is alright, that's 11.10. So yeah, we were able to have or verify connectivity with PC2. So let's try the other suggestion. From the command line on R2, let's ping PC2. So this time we'll be doing the ping from a router. So let's go to R2 and try to ping PC2. So PC2 is the same IP address we previously did. So ping 192.168.11.10. Right? So press enter and the success rate is actually 100. So let's try to do we are at R2, right? So let's try to ping PC1. Okay, PC1's IP address is 192.168.10. Right? So let's press enter and the success rate is also 100. Alright, that's it. We're done with our packet tracer activity, connecting a router to a LAN, actually connecting our two routers to local area networks, right? Bye!